Today on CBR, we'll dive into Kingpin's journey in the MCU, looking at how his character has changed and evolved across these stories. Let's get started. Kingpin's debut in the MCU through Daredevil 2015 on Netflix marked one of the most compelling and complex villain portrayals in the superhero genre, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. Wilson Fisk wasn't just a typical villain with power and resources. He was a multi-dimensional character with deep personal conflicts, moral complexities, and a tragic backstory that made him both terrifying and empathetic. From the start of the series, Kingpin stood out because of his sheer physicality. D'Onofrio's portrayal of Fisk was imposing, not just in his massive size, but also in his quiet, controlled demeanor. Fisk's physical presence contrasted sharply with the suave businessmen of Hell's Kitchen, and it was clear he was a man who commanded attention. Yet, it wasn't just his physical stature that made him a formidable presence, it was his mind. He wasn't simply a crime boss seeking wealth or power. Fisk was a man with a vision. His ultimate goal was to reshape Hell's Kitchen into something better in his eyes, a place free from the chaos and corruption that defined it. He saw himself as a savior, not a villain, and this twisted sense of morality formed the basis of his complex character arc throughout the series. The early episodes of Daredevil gave viewers a glimpse of Kingpin's vulnerabilities, especially through his traumatic childhood. His brutal upbringing, shaped by an abusive father and a world that treated him with disdain, made him both cold and emotionally scarred. The show took its time, exploring these moments of vulnerability, offering insight into how this abuse fueled his desire for control and order. Fisk's character was far from the stereotypical mob boss. His violence was often calculated and purposeful, not driven by simple malice, but by a desire to impose his worldview. A significant aspect of Kingpin's character in Daredevil was his relationship with Vanessa Mariana, a refined art gallery owner. Their romance became a key emotional anchor for Fisk, showing that despite his ruthless nature, there was still a human side to him. Vanessa represented a potential escape from his violent world, and their relationship allowed viewers to see Fisk in a more vulnerable light. This connection was more than just a love story. It was central to understanding his desire for control. Fisk's feelings for Vanessa were intense and obsessive, and he saw her as a symbol of his attempts to create a better world. In his mind, if he could protect Vanessa, he could also protect the world he envisioned. However, his possessiveness and need for control often clashed with her more independent, free-spirited nature, adding layers of tension to their relationship. Throughout the 3 seasons of Daredevil, Fisk's evolution was evident. Initially, he worked behind the scenes, manipulating others to carry out his plans. However, as the series progressed, he became more hands-on and unafraid to get his hands dirty. His methods grew increasingly brutal as he realized that to fully reshape Hell's Kitchen, he had to eliminate anyone who stood in his way, regardless of the cost. His rise to power in the criminal underworld was calculated, but it came at a cost. Fisk's need for control made him paranoid, and he frequently found himself surrounded by enemies, even within his own organization. The final season of Daredevil cemented Fisk's position as a criminal mastermind. By this point, he had been imprisoned, but his influence over the city didn't wane. Instead, he orchestrated events from behind bars, manipulating others to do his bidding. The season's final episodes showed just how far Fisk was willing to go to achieve his ultimate goals. Even in prison, his charm, intelligence, and ruthlessness were on full display. He was no longer just a mob boss. He was a dangerous figure who had transcended the limits of ordinary crime. Fisk's manipulations were so well executed that they ultimately led to the downfall of several key characters, and his rise to power was seen as inevitable. Though Daredevil concluded with Fisk behind bars, his arc wasn't finished. The final moments of the series hinted at his inevitable return. Fisk's imprisonment was merely a temporary setback. His story was far from over. This sense of unresolved business left an opening for his return to the larger MCU, and, as expected, he resurfaced in Hawkeye 2021, continuing his role as a formidable antagonist. His appearance in Hawkeye reinforced the idea that Kingpin was a larger-than-life character with an ongoing influence on the MCU's criminal underworld. Kingpin's portrayal in Daredevil remains one of the most memorable in the MCU, thanks to Vincent D'Onofrio's masterful performance and the writer's commitment to creating a character that wasn't just evil for the sake of evil. Fisk was a man with a vision, shaped by pain and a twisted sense of justice. His complexity, combined with his ruthless ambition, made him one of the most layered and unforgettable villains in recent television history. When Kingpin showed up in Hawkeye 2021, fans were hyped to see Vincent D'Onofrio back in the role of Wilson Fisk, especially after his standout performance in Daredevil 2015. But his return in the Disney Plus series wasn't quite the same as the version we saw in Hell's Kitchen. While the core of the character remained, Hawkeye gave us a much bigger and bolder version of Fisk, both in terms of his physical presence and his role in the MCU at large. First off, Kingpin's criminal empire had clearly grown since the days of Daredevil. In the Netflix series, he ruled Hell's Kitchen with a mix of manipulation and brute force, but in Hawkeye, his operations were way more widespread. He was now tangled up with the Tracksuit Mafia, a gang of criminals who were creating problems for Clint Barton and Kate Bishop. This made sense because by this point, Kingpin's influence stretched well beyond his old stomping grounds, and he was no longer just a local mob boss. He had become a big player in the MCU's criminal underworld. It was clear that Fisk had ambitions on a much larger scale, pulling the strings of all kinds of shady operations in New York City and beyond. Visually, Kingpin in Hawkeye was a bit of a shock for some fans, especially those who'd gotten used to his more grounded appearance in Daredevil. This time around, he looked huge, not just imposing like in Daredevil, but almost cartoonishly oversized. It was as if they cranked up his physical presence to match the MCU's larger-than-life style. Kingpin looked like a walking wall of muscle and suits, towering over everyone else in the scene. While this might have felt a bit exaggerated compared to his earlier appearance, it also felt in line with the MCU's tendency to go big with their characters. Despite the visual shift though, the character's essence was still there. His ruthless demeanor, his calculating mind, and his ability to control people remained unchanged. One of the most interesting aspects of Kingpin's return in Hawkeye was his relationship with Maya Lopez. Maya was a key figure in the show, and her connection to Kingpin added some real emotional weight to his character. In the MCU, Kingpin wasn't just a cold, calculating criminal mastermind. He was also a mentor and a father figure to Maya, taking her in when she was young and helping her navigate the criminal world. Their relationship added a personal layer to Kingpin that we hadn't seen before in Daredevil. It wasn't just about power anymore. Fisk had people he genuinely cared for, or at least he thought he did. When Maya starts to question his leadership, especially after learning more about his involvement in her father's death, it sets up some serious tension between the two. Maya's eventual betrayal of Kingpin was one of the most intense moments in Hawkeye. The fact that she had such a deep emotional connection to Fisk made the eventual fallout even more heartbreaking. For Kingpin, the betrayal hit hard, not just as a loss of power, but as a personal failure. He'd seen himself as a protector and guide to Maya, and her turning against him was a powerful moment that showed that even the most ruthless criminals aren't immune to the consequences of their actions. Kingpin's encounter with Kate Bishop also delivered some memorable moments. Despite his enormous size and presence, he didn't just rely on his physicality to dominate. His control over people and situations was what really made him dangerous. During his confrontation with Kate, it was clear that he wasn't just some muscle-bound villain. He was a strategic mastermind who could manipulate anyone to get what he wanted. It wasn't all brute force. Kingpin knew how to play the game and stay ahead of his enemies. Though Hawkeye didn't wrap up Kingpin's storyline completely, it definitely set things up for what's next. The ending left us wondering about the future of his character, especially with the way things ended with Maya and the potential for more confrontations with Kate. His presence in Hawkeye was a huge deal for fans who loved his portrayal in Daredevil, and it opened the door for future appearances in the MCU. To sum it up, Kingpin's return in Hawkeye was a mix of the old and new. Sure, he had a bigger presence physically, but at his core, he was still the same manipulative, power-hungry figure we saw in Daredevil. His relationship with Maya and his confrontation with Kate added emotional depth, showing that Fisk was more than just a villain trying to rule the world. He was a man with complex emotions and vulnerabilities. Kingpin's time in Hawkeye set up some exciting possibilities for his future in the MCU, and it was a welcome return for fans who'd been eagerly waiting to see him again. Echo 2023 really took Kingpin's character to a deeper level, especially when it came to his complicated relationship with Maya Lopez, aka Echo. After his appearance in Hawkeye, it became clear that Kingpin wasn't just some distant crime boss sitting in his ivory tower. He had a much more personal influence on Maya's life than we originally thought. In Echo, we get to see how Kingpin wasn't just a figurehead in her life, but actually played a significant role in shaping her into the person she became. One of the biggest things that Echo explores is how Kingpin manipulated Maya, not just as an ally or enemy, but as a tool in his larger schemes. It turns out that Kingpin had a hand in Maya's upbringing, molding her into a skilled fighter and using her abilities to further his own criminal empire. This reveals a more twisted aspect of Kingpin's character. His desire for control isn't just about power or money, it's about ownership of the people in his life. He doesn't just want to rule over Hell's Kitchen, he wants to possess the lives of those closest to him, shaping them to fit into his plans. The series also gives us a glimpse of Kingpin in a more vulnerable light. Unlike in Hawkeye, where it seemed like he shrugged off any consequences of his supposed death, Echo shows that the Kingpin isn't invincible. His physical injuries, especially from his fight with Maya in Hawkeye, are more noticeable now. His giant, intimidating frame is still there, but you can tell that he's been through a lot. The show really emphasizes that while Kingpin is still a massive threat, he's also dealing with the aftermath of his violent past, both physically and emotionally. It's a nice touch because it humanizes him a bit, showing that even someone as dangerous as Kingpin has his limits and vulnerabilities. Despite this, Kingpin remains just as dangerous as ever. In Echo, he's still a master manipulator, pulling strings from the shadows. His emotional ties to Maya are more complicated than ever, and this just adds another layer to his character. He's no longer just a cold, calculating villain. He's a man who has experienced loss, regret, and vulnerability, but still hasn't lost his edge. It's a Kingpin who's learned from his mistakes, but is still every bit the formidable force in the MCU. The Daredevil Born Again series, 2025, has brought Kingpin back into the fold, and it's clear that his character has evolved significantly. Vincent D'Onofrio's return as Wilson Fisk suggests that this new version of Kingpin continues his journey from the Daredevil Netflix series, Hawkeye and Echo, while also bringing him into the broader MCU narrative. In Born Again, Kingpin's role is deeply connected to his past appearances, but there are some important changes. Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is once again his primary antagonist, but Kingpin is no longer just the shadowy figure controlling Hell's Kitchen. Instead, he's become a major player in a much larger world. The show may take inspiration from the classic Born Again comic arc, which could bring fresh challenges for Kingpin in both his personal and professional life. The series has also provided an opportunity to delve deeper into Kingpin's psyche, now that he's been exposed to a world far bigger than his original criminal empire. There's a lot of potential to explore what drives him. The fallout from his actions in Hawkeye and Echo, particularly with Maya turning against him, is still very much in play. Will Kingpin seek revenge, or has he learned anything from his past mistakes? His relationship with Vanessa could also come into play again, adding more complexity to his character beyond just his role as a villain. Another interesting element of Born Again is how it fits within the MCU's larger multiverse. This opens up countless possibilities for Kingpin. Could he interact with other MCU characters outside of Daredevil? What does it mean to be a villain in a world full of cosmic threats, super soldiers, and magical beings? Kingpin's evolution has always been tied to his interactions with Daredevil, but with the stakes now higher, it'll be fascinating to see how he fits into the larger MCU puzzle. When we look back at Kingpin's journey across the MCU, it's pretty clear that his character has evolved a lot over time. In Daredevil, Netflix, he was this complex, morally gray figure, basically a tragic villain whose actions were shaped by the trauma he went through as a kid. His rise to power was super calculated, and he was always a step ahead, a real mastermind. While he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, he still managed to stay in control, and the show did a great job of showing that he wasn't just a typical bad guy. By the time we saw him in Hawkeye, Kingpin was on a whole new level. He was bigger, not just physically, but in terms of his role in the MCU. He wasn't just running Hell's Kitchen anymore, he was a serious player in the larger criminal world. His relationship with Maya added some extra depth to his character, showing how far he'd go to control those around him, even people he'd been close to in the past. Then in Echo, Kingpin's vulnerability started to show. He wasn't invincible, and the emotional weight of his connection to Maya really brought out a different side of him. Seeing him struggle with personal loss and betrayal made it clear that even though he's this powerful crime boss, he's not immune to the consequences of his actions. His evolution across these shows has made him feel more like a real character, someone who's learning from his mistakes and adjusting as things around him change. With Daredevil Born Again now out, Kingpin's story has taken another turn. He's back in Hell's Kitchen, and the show is challenging him in ways we haven't really seen before. His past actions are still haunting him, and the complexity of the MCU's multiverse only adds more unpredictability to what comes next. One thing's for sure, Kingpin's journey is far from over, and as we keep watching, we're seeing a villain who's constantly evolving and reacting to the world around him.
So I am not here to threaten you. I'm here to kill you.
Wilson Fisk's journey through the MCU has been a fascinating one. As the MCU continues to grow and expand, so too will his story. Which Kingpin appearance was your favorite? Let us know in the comments section. Thanks for watching CBR.